Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society. From messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted throughout our culture, Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Joining him are groundbreaking artist and podcaster Jacqueline Clare, whose focus on spiritual realism is summarized by the quote, "When we don't take the high road with our choices and miss the opportunity to develop spiritual qualities, we literally forfeit the purpose of our lives."
Spotlight Show. Artificial Morality.
Welcome everyone to Created in the Image of God. We have our first ever Spotlight Show for you tonight. In the Spotlight Show, actually this may be our first one that I'm participating in. I'm just recently back from Israel, as some of you know, and we had a Spotlight Show while I was in Israel. A Spotlight Show is taking a particular topic of broad and deep interest and creating an anthology around that show topic. Tonight we have a very special show for you. The topic is artificial morality, navigating the ethics of AI with Baha'i teachings or religious teachings. If you're watching live, remember to drop a note in the chat. Let us know that you're here and that you're watching. Also, feel free to post questions, which we can then use during the show or possibly bring them on towards the end of the show if we have time and if we have a segment for questions. Let me introduce tonight's special guest who will be joining us here shortly. Mr. Gilbert Hakim is the founder and CEO of SCC Soft Computer. He is widely recognized as a leading figure in the field of laboratory information systems, being at the forefront of innovation in this field since the late 70s. He continues to push the boundaries in genetics-based LIS and workflow automation, and he heads up a company with over 2,000 IT, medical, technology, communications, and business professionals, all dedicated to the design, development, delivery, implementation, and support of robust, integrated information management system solutions for the laboratory and the genetics workplace. Certainly, Mr. Hakim has seen a lot of change in his time and has a lot of insight into many of the probing questions that we all have as society continues to advance. Mr. Hakim has remained actively involved in all aspects of this company, providing the vision for ongoing product development through his knowledge of IT advancements, the role of molecular diagnostics, personalized medicine, and the needs of the hospital laboratory. So a wealth of information, and we can't wait to dig into this as it relates to tonight's topic. But I also want to highlight Mr. Hakim's philanthropist activities. He's dedicated to giving back to the community and has made many charitable contributions through his Golden Age Foundation. But he has also developed Ocean Library, which we'll be talking about on the show tonight. So without any further introduction, because I could go on and on and on about this man, I'm going to bring Mr. Hakim into the studio.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gilbert Hakim. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight, and hopefully I can shed some light on some of the newest technologies that exist, an application of it in healthcare as well as social sciences, and how these tools are being used to better human experience and eliminate problems that we all facing in a daily basis.
And I'm looking very much forward to a little bit later having our co-host and producer, Daniel Sanderson, who's up in Canada. He's the founder of PlankSip, and he's a philosopher. So I figured the matchup between you in this groundbreaking technology and having a philosopher interview would be the right approach for tonight's show. But I want to take a couple of moments to introduce you to the audience as a person. So I'm going to ask just a few questions about who and what you are, the experiences that have shaped you as a human being. The first one I'd like to know a little bit more about is just your very early years, where you were born, and what your experiences were, your family life in those first 10 to 12 years, those years that shape us. And as we become adults, we sometimes don't reflect back on how those years have molded and shaped us. But in terms of introducing you to the audience, tell us a little bit about those early formative years.
Sure. I was born in Tehran, Iran, and my mother was French. So from mother's side, she was Catholic actually, and my father was Baha'i. And of course, I grew up in that environment, be exposed to many different religions. We had family members that were Muslim, Jewish, Christian, of course, and Baha'is in general. So we get a roundabout knowledge about the sacred text of all religions in general.
You grow up speaking French, and should we be calling you Gilbert?
Uh, my name is Gilbert, but I haven't spoken French for probably more than 40 years. So I'm not sure if I remember most of it.
My undergrad major is in theology, but my minor was in French, and I actually lived briefly in France. I didn't know that about you. So you grew up in this somewhat multicultural environment, which probably, many Americans wouldn't think of Iran in that manner, right? Of having those kinds of influences. So how was it that you came to the United States? When did that happen?
Well, I went to National University of Iran in, I think it was 1970 to 1974. And ironically, because we were Baha'is, we were discriminated against. And of course, at the time, it was very hard to get even into universities because I remember at the time, they had 8,000 seats in the whole country, and 180,000 people would basically go through an exam to get selected to one of these universities. So obviously, it was a feat for me to get into National University, and I got scholarship also, and I graduated top 2 from my physics department that I was studying in. And of course, because of the tight religious doctrine that existed and was seeping into the universities at the time, our parents were trying to push us to go to a free country so we can exercise our religious views without any prejudice. So that's really when it came to United States. And of course, I didn't know any word of English.
Wow.
So I studied, went to Vermont in one of the English schools and for a summer. And then I got scholarship from State University of New York in Long Island. So they paid for the food because of my grades, lodging, food, and of course, tuition was paid for as well. And then I studied first in applied mathematics. I got a degree, master's degree in applied mathematics. And of course, I was a teaching assistant there. So they were paying me $3.60 an hour. And then I went and got another master's in computer science. And I got it once I graduated. One of my professors asked me to write a basic interpreter for Intel 8008 chip. So I wrote an assembly language application, and he sold, of course, the product for $15,000 to a company called Intel at the time in Long Island. So that's how it started generally.
So I want to take a quick step back from a history perspective. So did you move to the United States before 1979? I believe it was 79 where they had the revolution in Iran.
Yeah.
But you said that the influences were creeping into the educational system prior to that. So there must have been a movement going on within the country that supported then this revolution. Maybe you could just spend a minute. I'm just curious personally about,
Sure.
I've never really thought about what it would have been like in the years leading up to it. We Americans only know about the dramatic event, but not the
Of course.
cultural background.
No, we for the first time during the last year, I finished about 3.5 years my basically undergraduate studies, bachelor degree that I got. The last year, we saw many of these extremist Muslim with actually veils and students that were came to the university, and they were disrupting the classes. We had these. So just to make sure that the study of people gets disrupted. So they were showing their force that they're present, and they're against education or any sort of non-Muslim activities generally, which was very strange at the time, because you come to university to study, not to riot. So
Right.
it was very strange. And so this political environment was getting developed. And the first thing I did when I came to Kennedy Airport was just kiss the ground that when I left that chaos there, which was
Wow.
completely artificial. And
Well,
people don't know how good they have it here.
Thank you. Amen. I couldn't agree more. So I'm reminded when you bring up Intel, right, of Andy Grove, who of course was Hungarian and fled, in World War II. He, as a child, escaped from Nazi persecution, and he has a famous quote, which you're probably familiar with, Andy Grove: "Only the paranoid survive." Right. So does that resonate with you, given your experience coming from Iran in those circumstances, or what's your sort of basic philosophy that's leading you forward in your life and to the successes that you've experienced?
Well, generally, the process of education was very important to me and my family, and that was a ticket basically to leave the chaos that was about to unfold in Iran. And unless you were highly educated, you couldn't really have ability to move, because of the cost of living obviously was quite high in the United States, and very few families could afford to finance sending their kids. Although at the time wasn't as bad as today. To give you an indication, $1 was about 7 months. That means it was 7 times less expensive than dollar. Now today is close to 40,000.
Wow.
2 months. It's $1, and you see the basket of basically Persian family has shrunk. Iranian family shrunk. At the time, which is intriguing, at the time, the income of per capita income was about $9,000. Today is 3,000 after 44 years.
Wow.
Now imagine when religious doctrine gets mixed with politics, they both get corrupted. Both politics
Yes.
and the religion gets corrupted, and
Well,
you see the result of it right now.
I can see now we're going to have you back on the show to talk about that. Created in the image of God, the role of religion in society. This is a topic I'd love to dive into, but instead I'm going to just highlight this topic of education as a nice segue, the importance of education. And now, of course, we're advancing into new fields with artificial intelligence, right? So I'm going to quickly go to a commercial break and play the spotlight advertisement for the anthology that we're building, which we're having you help us with curating. And when we come back, we'll bring you and Daniel back, or you back to the screen with Daniel to dive into that topic. So thank you so much for letting us get to know you a little better, Gilbert.
My pleasure.
Artificial morality. The future of AI is rapidly changing, and with it, the future of humanity. How will we approach this transformative technology? Will we make ethical decisions that shape a bright future for all? Or will we be swayed by greed and self-interest? The world's great spiritual teachings offer a path forward, a way to use the tools we create for the betterment of humanity. They remind us that we are all created in the image of God and that our technological advancements must reflect this spiritual reality. In Artificial Morality, Navigating the Ethics of AI with Spiritual Teachings, we present a vision of hope where technology serves humanity and not the other way around. Join us as we explore this critical topic through stories of inspiration and hope. To submit your own tale of navigating the ethics of AI and become a part of this groundbreaking anthology, simply email us at info@supellc.com.
Welcome.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure to have you here tonight, Gilbert.
My pleasure.
It's nice to see you again. I know we spoke a couple weeks ago, and
Pleasure is mine.
yeah, it was nice to get to know you, and we spent probably an hour and a half or 2 hours talking about artificial intelligence. So why don't we just dive right in? And Gilbert, let me ask you very direct question. Morality, is it possible to have artificial intelligence help us with morality?
Of course, remember, a person, our minds are subjective. We're not an objective machine. So we get influenced by the information that we have and experiences that we have. And of course, narration of the information that reaches us, and we react to it. So we don't, our brains are not designed like a machine. So we can get easily influenced based on information that we receive. So the question really goes back of, can we use a methodology of artificial intelligence to prove actually the moral or ethical, basically, laws are right or wrong? Now, something may be good, but may be unethical. And we may not know unless we explore it and apply it. And unfortunately, by that time, it's too late. So artificial intelligence and machine learning language gives us a tool to gain from the experience of the past with volumes of information that humans cannot process individually. So through that process, we can extract a formula that, by plugging in different variables, it can tell us whether an axiom, a law, or ethics, whether it's right or wrong. So for example, let's say equality of gender, right? This is a law, is a common practice. The question is that what happens, how can we know whether it's right or wrong? The way to do it is very simple. In an artificial, basically, intelligence, which is derived from a machine learning language. So what we do is we come and spot, based on country of origin, based on percentage of males, females of a country, based on religious doctrine and superstition that is permeated in those countries, how restrictive they are against women, for example. And then we can correlate that to their level of education, level of their financial progress, level of their scientific progress, level of their health progress, and so on. So if you map that within the world and take those combination of age, gender, religion, natural, basically habitat, let's say gross national product of that country, it becomes very obvious that if you, for example, take 50% of your population out of the economy, you're going to have a very poor economy.
Right, Gilbert. I think I understand where you're going with this, but what is your feeling about this being primarily a secular claim? I mean, it from my vantage point, and it's just an initial reaction, but the secular community seems to take ownership to that potential upside, right? And it seems to me pulling some of the ownership or the equity that religious institutions have had in the past, based off of the collection of data, interpreting large swaths of socioeconomic data, right? This seems to be something that is being pushed or advocated for, almost maybe not directly, but indirectly against religion. How do you see that?
Well, remember, the basis of all the religions are one and the same. I mean, no religion advocates unethical behavior of any kind. So the key is progression of religion itself, where, of course, based on socioeconomic of the old ages versus when we were living in caves and living in communes. Ironically, which very interesting, when they did excavations, they found out even the primitive man, they had graves, and they were putting monuments on the graves. So they had this notion of a creator was even from beginning, although it may have been not a monotheistic religion at the time, but this concept of a superior creator was even with us from beginning of a civilization in general. So progression of religion, the ethics of it really hasn't changed from that perspective. The question becomes application of the ethics itself. For example, when we're talking about revelation of, for example, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, let's say Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah. So all these revelations are a set of instructions or laws that can, through artificial intelligence, you can actually prove it to be correct. But we have to differentiate revelation, like Bible, from the adherents of the religion itself. So religions are a byproduct or an application of revelation between humans. So it's a man-made basically entity that is subject to laws of thermodynamics, which any closed system, when it uses its internal energy, it basically disappears. It falls apart. Unless there is outside the system, there is an infusion of energy that make it grow. So when you're looking at civilization as a general model, it's defied the second law of thermodynamics. And why is it growing all the time? It's supposed to die. Today, for example, based on laws of thermodynamics, we know billions of years from now, our sun is going to extinguish and becomes a supernova. We can even tell it fairly accurately when it's going to happen in the future. That means any element in the whole universe follows these laws. How come civilization is defying it? And the reason is this infusion of the ethics or moral standard that comes through revelation to humanity. And it causes jump in civilization.
Yeah, well, I want to push back a little bit and get some clarification as to why humanity seems to be defying these odds. Because if I'm reading between the lines, I think that there's that's probably where you find your faith, and I'm guessing, but I think that we as sapiens are incredibly adaptive, but we are one species, and just by biomass, an ant has the same biomass as humans on the planet. So whatever metric we're actually using to compare thriving dominant species on a planet, you could put the ant species as plural as something that rivals the human species. Right now, they're automatons. They've got I think 15,000 species, right?
Sure.
Possibly even more, but we've got one species, right? One species. And so to me, I feel that we're fragile in terms of being one species, right? That the threat of an extinction could be more real than it could be for a different species that has, or multiple species, right? So what are your thoughts of that, about how successful we are? Like, and to pull back to the original part of the question, Gilbert, do you think that we are an exceptional species guided, and that explanation is being guided by a higher power? Is that the totality of where you would answer that?
Yeah, remember, we're the only species that has consciousness. There is no other species on Earth that has consciousness. And that's what differentiates us from other species that exist. Of course, we all started from a single cell, basically creation that ended up through evolution. But when you're looking at species, when the combination of the material elements chemically combined, life started to get created. So the question really is that from perspective of the human species, let's look at, for example, from mid-1800. If you look at the progress of civilization, going back to that subject, 92% of the population of the Earth, you're talking about maybe 150, a couple of hundred years, 150, 170 years ago, 92% of the population couldn't read or write. Now you have a completely different environment. The chance of a basically newborn to reach 5 years old was only 30%.
Yeah.
So when you're looking the advancement in sciences and basically healthcare, food production, industrialization, all these events occurred. Well, why didn't it occur 300 years ago? 500 years ago. So you see these cycles that are occurring, the same thing that happened during the basically when Muhammad brought in the Islam, and the main reason actually Islam spread throughout the world was because spiritually he enforced breaking down the caste system that existed in the world at the time. That's why people are under this impression that most of the Islam was spread through sword, which wasn't the case actually. There were about 8,000 nomads with swords, and they brought down over 100,000 basically soldiers of the Persian Empire. How could this happen? And the reason was that whenever they were attacking a particular city or province, people themselves wanted to get rid of their own ecclesiastical system that created that caste system to free them from that process. Even, for example, when you're looking at Jerusalem, the Jews were inviting Muslims because of the pressure that they were in, and they were looking at Muslims or as a liberator of the Palestine at the time, because they were under the influence of Rome, Roman Empire from that perspective. And of course, Roman was using the whole Roman Empire was financed by Egyptian slaves and Middle Eastern basically slaves. That's how they were financing their wars with Persian Empire. But when you're looking at what happened in 670 AD, and suddenly this Islamic culture grew to a point where by I think was 11th or 12th century, it was dominant. It was golden ages of the Islamic civilization. Well, algebra was invented, their chess was invented, the number 0 was invented. So it's many of these sciences. As a matter of fact, there are Islamic scholars of the time, their books was in use up to about 120 years ago. It's really intriguing how that civilization grew. And of course, during that period, Europe was in dark ages. Of course, it wasn't because sun wasn't out. It's because ecclesiastical structure of Christianity hijacked the political system and kept people in dark.
Well, let's pause there for a minute, because you're covering a lot of territory that we could spend. Yeah, we could spend many hours going down.
Sure.
So let's focus a little bit on morality and where it's derived. Because on one hand, I can say that morality is derived from consciousness, which is that God-given gift that you refer to. That makes us unique. It is the light. It is the ghost in the machine. It is what makes me me and you. So how do you get that into, and I think I know where you're going to go with this. You say you have inductive based models where you look at a historical past, collect information, and try and predict the future based off of things that happened in the past. That is an inductive model of reasoning for people that don't know philosophy or computer science. But there's other forms of reasoning. So hopefully you can go into that. And basically, I'm wondering, how do you get the ghost into the machine? How do you teach artificial intelligence, and I mean even general artificial intelligence, is that even possible to put that into a computer program or into a humanoid-like creation, android, if you will?
That's correct. Remember, artificial intelligence doesn't invent anything new. What it does is crunches the information to find a pattern within the events that occurred in the past. So, for example, let's say a patient shows up in the emergency room, and normally what they do is they do a urine test, and they basically take, for microbiology, they take a sample of the blood and put it into a dish and send it to the lab to be processed. Of course, it takes almost probably between 3 to 8 hours to get the result back. Now, they found that if they can detect the sepsis the first half an hour of patient in the emergency room and sending them to the ICU, the survival rate would be 80%. If it goes beyond 30 minutes and you take the patient after, let's say, 1 hour, the survivability drops to actually 20%. So the artificial intelligence comes into play by creating a formula that can use the result of the urine test itself, of chemical components of the urine test, based on formula and factor, and looking at tens of thousands of the patients that had similar chemical combination that had actually sepsis, then they can tell by doing a test through artificial intelligence and this machine learning language that took all the information about these maybe 100,000 patients with different chemical combination to tell whether this patient is going to survive, and they have to ship him to the ICU immediately versus him lingering around waiting for the microbiology department to give a result after, let's say, 8 hours. So this is really a use of it in healthcare that is basically is being used in general, or detect, for example, heart attack based on your vital sign, your let's say genetics background, your pedigree of the patient, means aunt's uncle, history of heart attack. You can plug this information into the formula, and the system would tell you whether you're going to have a heart attack within the next 48 hours or not.
Yeah,
so
those are two really good examples, Gilbert. And I think Gilbert's oversimplifying that you can just plug them in. I mean, there is an interface, and it can be quite an elaborate one. And the bigger the programs, the more elaborate the interface. But I think that's a really important part of the conversation. It makes me think of an emergency room situation, and there's something comforting about that. If you're faced with a tough decision, that a doctor can say, okay, well, we can do A, B, or C, 20%, 30%, here are the risks. Like, to have that information is so valuable. And we're gonna dig into this a little more about the marriage between technology, artificial intelligence, and the human species right after this break.
Sure.
And welcome to Something or Other Publishing, or as our friends like to call us, Soup. Soup is a platform that connects authors, readers, and service providers in one convenient place. Choose Soup if you're an author with a great book idea and you're looking for a publisher offering hands-on coaching in some of the best royalties in the business. Or if you're a reader who enjoys engaging with celebrated and emerging authors. We already have over 3,000 of them, and more are joining every day. You can even win free books by voting on their book ideas. Or maybe you're a service provider and you're looking to engage with over 3,000 authors. We're here to help. So whether you're an author, a reader, or a service provider, you're in the right place at Soup. Contact us at help@soupllc.com to learn more.
Okay, welcome back. I'm with Gilbert Hakim, and before we went to commercial break, we were talking about the healthcare system, and I confessed something to the audience that I'd feel comfortable, or I feel comfortable with information and being given the ability to make a decision in a tough situation like an emergency room visit. Gilbert, what are your thoughts? Is this how you envision artificial intelligence working well with humans?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons to use artificial intelligence. Remember, our resources are limited. So you have to be highly accurate. Highly accurate means that better than 99%, that this person has sepsis or not. Otherwise, you would send people that don't have that to the ICU, and then you run out of ICUs very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So you see the application of AI and machine learning language in terms of defining the variables and coefficient of those variables that gives us a formula for a binary decision.
Mm-hmm.
Is this patient sepsis or not? And same process actually applies into application of in artificial intelligence in social sciences. It's called sociodynamics, for example. That means that you create models, and there's many different use of it today. And although we travel in our highways and roads and visit red lights and green lights, and we think everything runs smooth, but behind that, there is actually a logistic model, which is an artificial intelligence that has a model that they have defined in the context of sociodynamics of behavior of humans based on time of the day, basically day of the week, congestion and certain events, maybe football game. How do they manage these red lights and green lights to not create gridlocks in the society? So logistic models applies to, for example, how a town grows, what elements make a town grow, and attraction of people to this town. And of course, eventually it will go into saturation. And they use those models to see how many roads do they need. Do they need schools because of the childbearing age females? So these are really key elements that artificial intelligence can predict the needs of the society or community in the future, and they can plan for it. So we don't get into an environment which it takes 5 hours to go to work every day.
Yeah.
So these are the key elements. That's one use of the artificial intelligence in sociodynamics called logistic model. Then you have diffusion model. Diffusion model is basically like disease. How does disease spreads? Rumors, norms, technologies, knowledge. How does it dissipates? Progresses. And all these things have these machine learning language because they have history and they can monitor progress of a disease and the spread of a disease, they can fine-tune the model by feeding it more and more information. Then later on, they can use it for predicting if a new pandemic occurs, how would it spread?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the use of artificial intelligence, which is called diffusion model. Then you have a gravity model, which is basically migration of people from one state to the other. Traffic volume, for example, that we discussed. These are gravity models. So these are all using machine learning language and artificial intelligence to help us manage the growth of the society and the conveniences that we enjoy today. And then you have the other model is game theory, which is social cooperation, social competition, optimum economic outcome. So when you look at Wall Street, this game theory model is in use. And the computers are making those decisions. That's why it's very difficult to go against machines that are making the trades. Mm-hmm. And other times the retail investor is at a loss. They don't understand what is happening. But all of those calculations are done with high-speed fiber network computers that tells them when to buy, when to sell, who the market maker is. So all these are really game theory and follows the same model in terms of defining variables, whether it's emotional, political, laws of demand, and so on.
That's very interesting. I think I'd like to take this a little bit of a different direction, but related to the very first example you gave in the traffic light situation. The traffic lights and those intricate algorithms that are constantly running in the background of our urban movement. This is quite fascinating. I think if people stop and consider what actually has to happen in some of these complex spaghetti junctions or busy intersections, it's quite fascinating. I wanted to bring Elon Musk into the equation, sure. and probably not in the way we initially had talked, but
sure.
Elon, I want to talk about the autonomous cars for a minute. And
sure.
This came up.
Just 1 second. I just want to add something very important.
Mm-hmm.
By invention of GPS, basically, and your cell phone in your car, the model doesn't have to be static, that you're predicting an event in a particular time of the day.
Mm.
The information can be completely online. That means the volume of cars that are coming in can be fed into the computer, and the decisions are made in microseconds of how to turn the lights on or off. So it doesn't have to be a static formula. It can be a dynamically running algorithm that is completely adjusting itself as it goes on.
Right. Okay. So what?
Go ahead.
No, but I think what Gilbert was trying to do is make a very important distinction. When I had said algorithm, it's so much more complex than a simple A, B, C, D. It's more like a Markov chain or something that's feeding in on itself and changing through time in multiple different ways. So yeah, my apologies, and thank you, Gilbert, for catching that. So the ethical question that I want to bring up is that there appears to be a double standard with deaths in an automobile. Now, we're not in the age where we have autonomous cars Elon Musk's plan hasn't materialized as fast as he envisioned, but he basically was hopeful that we would be, well, I guess the vision that he painted, that we would all be behind cars that drove themselves, right? And so we wouldn't have to actually command a vehicle to go to work, go to school, drop kids off, or go on road trips or this kind of thing. So there appears to be a bit of a double standard, right? So if heaven forbid I got into an accident and my kids were hurt or something like that, that would be absolutely horrific. But imagine, how do you assign blame to a probability or to a program? And it's not so much, it's like, I mean it from a cathartic sort of standpoint of blame. Like I can absorb and put that weight on my shoulders, but
Sure.
How do you reconcile that was the machine? Like it's really, to me, it feels really, feels like a huge mountain for people to climb. If they're behind and they have control, even if the probabilities of survival are less under human control, it feels like that's something that people will be hesitant to give up. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we need to define it first, what it is. First of all, the angle of view that you have is at best about 90 degrees, that you can see on your front of it, that events that are occurring within 90 degrees of your eyesight.
When you're driving the car, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's the case. Now imagine a Tesla car or other cars, they have probably close to 8 to 10 eyes, not two, they have 10 eyes in 360 degrees. So they can detect elements of danger way before the human being can. So from a mathematical point of view, whether it's noise of a braking car behind you, which you can't hear, but the computer does hear it, and actually accelerate your car when it hears somebody braking in the back, because they may cause an accident and you shouldn't be there. So variable of decision making is 100 times faster and more elements the computer can cover than humans do. Now, there are many different methods of detecting a human or avoiding an accident. But imagine that it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you had a very heavy dinner and you had a couple of glasses. Your response times cannot match a car that always behaves the same way. Now, obviously, there may be glitches within the application, which is very rare, or a malfunction of the mechanical parts that can cause an accident. But the ratio of the accidents that can occur because of the failure of the application or mechanical failure is basically 10 times less than a human being behind the wheel. So the moral standard is irrefutable that an autonomous car is safer than humans are.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I just feel that I can anticipate a pushback because individuals will be experiencing that, and they will reconcile that with, if I was in that situation, I could have done something differently.
But remember, you see, you're talking about an adult in middle ages that is behind the car and has all his attentions. But we have 16-year-old that doing texting and driving at the same time,
Yeah.
and you're going to be subject to it regardless, whether you're smart or not smart, or you're old, or we have problems with aged people in Florida that they get into accident. And by the way, your insurance reflects that as well. But the whole issue is that you can avoid all these problems. And ironically, in I think mid 1900s, the science of thermodynamics, the statistical prediction of quantum mechanics seeped into basically sociodynamics. So quantum mechanics is based on behavior of the molecular level or atomic level of the basically any material. And everything is statistics. And what it promotes is very intriguing. You may open the door from your house, step outside, there is a minute chance you end up in Paris.
Well,
you see, that's what it is. So everything is a statistical event that can occur. And the same basically quantum mechanics can be applied to within sociodynamics that we just discussed on the decision model. One of the other elements that we discussed beside the game theory is called decision model. How do humans make decisions? Because we're an analog machine. We're not a real computer that behaves the same way all the time. And obviously, if you cover all the areas that an accident can occur and you have defense against it, chances of survival is 100 times better than a human that may be tired, may be under influence, and so on and so forth. Just take alcohol, for example. This is a very good example where we tried to eliminate it, of course, early 1900, and we weren't successful. But in reality, alcohol is causing so much damage to the society. So it's really morally wrong. Although you can say this body belongs to me and I'm in charge of it and I can do anything I want with it as long as I don't harm other people. But guess what? If you drink and sit behind a car, you're going to cause 40,000 deaths that is occurring in the United States every year. That's 4 times Vietnam War occurring every year in the United States, and nobody says anything because to our psyche, it's impossible to solve this problem. So we don't think about it, but it's morally wrong because it's causing harm to the society. So your body, although it's yours, but is a unit of labor of the society that has to provide services to move civilization. So it's not just only yours. And this is really the concept which is really different when you're dealing with a secular society and you take ethics out of it. And this is what you get.
Very interesting. Very interesting. We have we do have time for a break, and I'm wondering if one of our most dedicated fans might be able to join us and bring up the conversation and bring the show back to a religious and put some religious depth back into the show. This fan is named Wade, so we'll see if he pops back in. Guys, watch for it. We got a commercial break coming up right now, and who knows what you see when you come back. Okay, hold on.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study, with an immersive audio-integrated reading experience and powerful research tools. Available on all platforms including web, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye and improved comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, and with our interfaith library featuring books from Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Jainism, Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, and Baha'i. You'll have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate your reading experience.
Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled.
Well, look
Great.
what we have here. We have Wade back in studio. Wade, I'm glad you could join us. How have you been
Thanks for
enjoying?
inviting me back in. I was actually really just listening. This was an amazing conversation. And it was really nice to not have to be participating and just to listen and reflect on this. I have been noticing some of the questions in the comments. A couple of them popped up on screen. I'm going to just show one of them here and then lead into a question here. So this is actually somebody that I've met in the last week. I'm going to see if I can get his name. Micaiah, I believe is how he pronounces it. And he is the founder of interfaithlibrary.com. He will actually be our guest on next week's show. So I thought we'd introduce him here by saying, by his comment, I can somewhat see its use in tangible applications. But how would AI work in non-tangible space, such as interfaith or multi-faith cooperation? We are talking about morality and ethics. And kind of as an add-on to that, this article that we used as part of the research for this that came out about Elon Musk's efforts, there was a pastor who was saying that he could see, first of all, that this development is going to happen. We have artificial intelligence embedded in our world, and Elon Musk was saying, when you use this thing, day in, day out. That's my daughter here who's saying she's trapped in the phone. That's she did that to my phone. Help, I'm trapped in your phone. But we have this with us all the time, and we're using it to access information and guide us. I can't go anywhere without it on the road these days. And we're using it to interact with other people through calling. And so we're progressing. Artificial intelligence is happening, and it's becoming embedded in the human experience. And this one pastor was saying, hey, no problem, as long as we use the Christian teachings, right? So there you go, right? The devil is in the details, pun intended. And, Micaiah was saying, how do we, infuse morality and ethics into artificial intelligence when we're not even really in agreement as a species on what those key moral and ethical issues are?
No, of course. But remember, the basic banner of the civilization and unity of mankind, start of it was, I think it was 1946 when United Nations was formed, and I think it was 1940, yeah, it's 48, where the individual rights, human rights was passed.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
That's
Same
right.
year that the state of Israel was founded. We've talked about that extensively on this show.
Correct. Yeah. So when you're looking at the edicts of that basically document, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt which was championing that and got it signed. And 180 countries today have signatory to that document. But when you look at gist of it, every one of them believes or believed in those, I think, close to 30 items within that declaration. But when you're looking at application of those laws, majority of the countries are violating them. So the key really creation of or knowledge of ethical behavior is within us, and it comes from all religion, basically, that builds that cohesive knowledge that created that document in 1948. But reality is that freedom of speech. Do we have freedom of speech today? You know, freedom of basically.
Right. There's another comment from AM Sterling. I showed this a little while ago. Are there any concerns about bias creeping into AI systems? Right. Elon Musk has purchased Twitter. Why? Because I suspect one of the reasons is he felt that a bias had crept into Twitter, and he exposed that bias through the Twitter files. And Matt Taibbi, whom I've been a fan of going back, when 2 decades almost, when he started writing in the Rolling Stone magazine and was just this firebrand journalist who, frankly, he was, very much on the liberal side, which Rolling Stone magazine. Um, and yet he now is, looking into Twitter with Elon Musk and exposing how bias crept in and how government agencies were even furthering that bias as to which speech should be allowed and which speech should not be allowed. Right. So this is a risk and concern. How do we protect against, they say there's this old saying, to get things, it's to err is human, but to really screw things up, you need a computer, right? How do
That's
we
right.
keep it from getting worse, not better?
Yeah, remember this social media, because it's not regulated, their main goal, ironically, now we see polarization in the American society, but this is really byproduct of the social media itself, because it's neither left or right. It's actually amoral, although when we're looking at it from a left, we say, it's leaning toward left, or when you're from right, we're seeing that there are too many people agreeing with us on the right. But reality is that social media is amoral. The only goal they have is to keep their people that are subscribing to them into the fold, to sell them advertising. But to sell advertising, you need to create this unity. You need to basically create different groups that have a different buying patterns. And to do this, the same social media feeds left to the liberal group and right conservative to the right group. Same social media. And the reason they do this is because they want to keep them back into their fold. And humans' nature is that if you see tens of thousands of people that agree with you, you think that it reinforces your own idea. But you have no idea how the other group are thinking, because you never see it. They don't even present it to you. Mm-hmm. So social media is amoral, and their only need to create profit for themselves by keeping you within the basically Facebook or Twitter or so on and so forth. So polarization of United States is not by accident or we became polarized. It's the byproduct of basically segregation of society, whether it's political, gender, color, or religious. They want to compartmentalize people into different areas so they can go to the advertiser and say, look, I found this group that has this type of buying pattern, and these are their beliefs.
Yep. So to clarify a couple of things, when you use the term amoral, you're not saying immoral. You're not saying that social media is immoral, but rather that it has no morality. It is in a sense a Frankenstein monster, in that it's a creation of people who themselves have a profit motive, right? So
Exactly.
it powerfully pursues the intent of its creator, which is to make money. And
Correct.
this is the beauty of that Frankenstein story, right? Technology was harnessed, but then it took off in a direction that was unintended, and yet we see the intent behind it in reality, right? The corporation becomes, in a sense, an entity that has agency, and it also is it can grow very large and very powerful because it has legal rights and it's protected, but it can relentlessly pursue the goals of its founders, right? And the goal is to make money, and
Money,
it is amoral, right?
correct. But remember, you see, people think that the news that they hear is the truth. But how could a social media have two versions of the truth for two different groups?
Right, because it's selling to it is not only dividing them into groups, but it's creating a desire, a need, a want, right, for information that they can provide by creating that division, right? They can sell to both groups, is what you're saying.
Of course, that's the reason that they exist in general.
And by amping up the respective echo chambers on either side, they're creating more demand for that type of information. It's a kind of crack cocaine of information, is what it is.
Correct.
I got to push back a little bit on this, you guys, because it sounds like if it's such a bad thing, then why don't we just turn it off?
But you can't. That's the whole point.
The reason is that we are human, and this is coming from our desire, right? So I want to throw this out there, Gilbert, and see how you respond to this. There's the possibility that this artificial, if you will, or an external input has more objectivity than we do, right? Because you mentioned alcohol as a great example, and guess what? I suffered from that. My mother was an alcoholic, so that part was resonating with me. You know, somebody should have done something, right? Somebody should have done something because my family was destroyed by it, and me and my sisters and whatnot, and many other millions of people. But nobody's going to do something because it's what the people want. The people want it, and so therefore it's allowed. And others exploit their weaknesses and their desires for profit or power.
Of course. See, the reality is that when the social networks are unregulated, if you look at the population of Facebook, there are 2 billion people on Facebook. Now, if you look at the best newspaper, you're looking at daily use of maybe 100,000, 200,000. That's it.
Right, but the real issue that we're seeing now in society globally is that the regulators are no better and sometimes worse than those that they're trying to regulate. Isn't that the essential problem that we have?
Well,
This is the point of the Twitter files, for example, is that yes, it was being regulated, and as it became regulated, it was turned into something even worse than it was before.
I don't believe they're not under the same regulation as newspaper or cable news. They're not. They're immune from it. So they can say anything they want to anybody they want. And you cannot sue them. So they can create realities. By the way, they have another reinforcement called bots. These are actually non-human registered basically users that through computer they generate opinions and then they resonate with people, and people think, look, there are 100,000 people think like me, but maybe 90% of them are actually computers that are feeding you information to reinforce that you're a good person, your ideas are great.
It's bot, right? BOT is what you were referring
That's
to.
right.
Yeah.
It's the instead of robots, they call it bots.
Yeah.
Right. It's the application of artificial intelligence.
Of course.
That's they're in the rub with this whole topic, right? Because that, so and who controls the artificial intelligence, and how do we ensure, right, that it gets applied properly? So I don't know that we're going to resolve this tonight. It sounds like we're going to have you back and maybe start from this point and dive into the maybe some practical applications. I know that you have created Ocean 2.0. We showed an ad for that a little while ago. Maybe that would be a good place to sort of wrap up for today. What is your vision for Ocean 2.0, and how can that be? Is it a stepping stone to what you're referring to, or is it something separate and independent that you've created?
Of course, the key really is the truth and moral standard comes from revelation, not from religion, but revelation, which is Bible, Quran, Aqdas from Baha'is. You have
Amen. We're unapologetic about that on this show.
Right.
We talk about the two books of Revelation, right? We have the revealed word, and then we have, frankly, the greater revelation, which is the creation itself. And it's been my position that science is only beginning. It's at the infancy of being able to read that second great book of Revelation, the creation itself. It's almost as though we're just now learning the alphabet. And people think science is so advanced and they trust the science, but we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what the potential that science has to understand, as Einstein said, the thoughts of God.
Basically, about 20 years ago, with Chad Jones, which is one of my friends and colleagues that work with us, we actually did an experiment that was very successful. So we took 4 books and we took kids from 11 to 17 and put them in a bunch of condos and forced them to read and listen for 10 hours a day.
As a parent, I'm going to be sending you my kids. Thank you. But please continue.
They were sleeping in the condos. We were feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They were not allowed to call their parents. So the only way they could communicate was through social media with their parents and their experiences. And the rate of absorption of the information that was in these 4 books was 10 times higher than just a person reading it themselves. So what we figured out is that we automate this. You have billions of people in the world. How could you have them this experience when you actually see letters and you hear, you register 10 times better and retain it 10 times better? So that's really where, of course, as you know, one of our edicts of the Baha'i religion is move toward common language around the world. So we said that obviously English is the primary language currently spoken all around the world. By the way, soon we have more English speaking people in Asia than we would have in the Western society. So this is spreading quite rapidly. So what we did is that for third world countries, we developed this application where we took analog voice of a human being, a storyteller. So people that listen to it, they don't get tired and they want to learn more. And of course, showing the letters of the book, and you can stop it, you can press on it, you can have a dictionary opening up telling you what the meaning of that word is. So how about teaching English through Bible to people? And that's really what all Islamic book or Baha'i books or so this
now
the whole idea.
Now I have to tell you a story in support of it. I mentioned at the beginning of the show my undergrad degree, major in theology, minor in French. I purchased the Bible in French. And I would play those old cassette tapes as I was going to sleep at night on my Walkman, right? And by virtue of playing in French, the verses that I partially knew or knew their content, I accelerated my French learning and was then accepted to the French language program. Even though when I took college French, I was first year French, and some of them have had 4 years in high school. But I quickly accelerated beyond some of them. There may have also been some natural talent, but so I'm just resonating with what you're saying, an enhanced reading experience as to how that can dramatically accelerate the learning capability of the students in the program.
No, this is really critical in terms of seeing the actually word itself and being able to see the meaning of it without going sideways, opening up a dictionary. So you can actually see what it is and you can hear it. But the difficult portion was it took us almost 7 years to really take the analog voice of a human being and then match it to the words itself. So you're hearing a fantastic story. So we hired a bunch of Shakespearean actors to read those books. And, it gets you excited into the story itself. So similarly, someone wants to learn Arabic, they can go and read Quran. And so these are revelations of God that unfolded throughout history of mankind, or Buddhism or Jainism and so on and so forth. So this was really the key to having multiple languages. We have, even in Portuguese, we have some. You can read basically sacred books in Portuguese for that matter. So these are really key elements which help propagate both English and other languages through the revelation of God.
Wonderful. Well, Gilbert, it's been just an absolute pleasure having you on the show. So grateful that you came and shared some of the things you're working on, some of the ideas that you have. Love to have you back in the future to learn more about that. And of course, we thank you for your support of this show. We will continue to, showcase the anthology idea that we're hoping to build, as well as the Ocean 2.0. We'll look forward to keeping tabs on the development and the rollout of that as that goes along. Anything that you'd like to conclude with tonight? I'll just mention again, next week's guest will be Micaiah, who is the founder of Interfaith Library, and we'll look forward to having him on. But what parting words of wisdom or, remaining comments that you're thinking of as I'm doing my little ending monologue here would you like to leave our audience with tonight?
Sure. First, I just want to mention the Ocean 2 interfaith reader is free of charge. You can download it from the App Store. So it's completely free of charge, and it should be read and used for improving your language of choice, for that matter. Now, we were discussing, for example, these infusion of the basically development of revelation itself.
I guess that's it right there. I'm going to download it right now. Unfortunately, it's not it's blurry, but there it is. That's how quick I'm getting it right now.
Yeah, similar to jump in civilization that occurred during Islamic era, and now you see the religion of Islam is in decline. Generally, the revelation of Baha'u'llah that came in mid-1800 infused that energy into the world, dissipated the moral and ethical standard that now shows up in Declaration of Human Rights in United Nations. And of course, the Baha'i religion was the first NGO of United Nations that helped draft that document.
Yeah, when I was in Israel, I went to the Baha'i World Center, and they introduced this welcome center that I had not seen before, built into Mount Carmel. And as I was, and they just all this display of everything related to the Baha'i faith. But I noticed over in one corner, they had that draft document on display from 1946. And I was not aware of that. We've talked on this show, on past shows, my belief that Matthew 25, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, he will judge the nations. And I've shared my perspective that the way in which that judgment is occurring, because Matthew, the book of Matthew, starts out with this idea that we should not judge, and that according to whatever standard of judgment we set up, that is how God is going to judge us. And it occurred to me, well, the standard that has been set up globally is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Because I was asking the question, how exactly will the Son of Man, when he comes in his glory, judge the nations? How will he actually judge the nations? Well, they have set up their own standard by which that judgment will occur, in the fact that they all signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And as you read further in Matthew 25, the kinds of things that the Son of Man, when he comes in his glory, will use to judge those nations, he separates them like sheep from goats. And the decision is, did you give a glass of water to the thirsty? Did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked?
Exactly.
Did you establish a just system to visit them when they're sick, and to treat them with equity when they're in prison? At the national level, this standard is documented in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And as you mentioned, far too many nations are miserably failing in delivering these basic human rights, if you will. And these nations have that responsibility to their citizens, and they've signed up to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that judgment is occurring on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the reasons actually humanity is going toward irreligion, because of the abuse of the ecclesiastical systems in terms of, in the name of God or revelation, causing harm.
Right. And, they're all causing harm. The ones who have thrown off religion, frankly, I would submit that they are causing more harm. But there's something even worse when you do it in the name of your God, when you explicitly, because now you're putting your bad behavior on God, and you are turning people away from God because you are so grossly misrepresenting God. It's the first commandment, that Moses brought down from Sinai, right? Not taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain, not applying his name to that which you are doing.
Of course. I think,
So, sorry. So, you were talking, though. I'm sorry, I went off on this tangent about Matthew 25 judging the nations because of something that you were saying about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I probably took you off the track as to why you were bringing that up.
No, it's the key really is that, for example, when you're looking at sciences, which we believe is parallel to revelation, these are wings of the same bird, and they have no conflict whatsoever between them. And through mathematics, actually minimalism is a good example that proves the existence of God with mathematics, actually. Dr. William Hatcher was the philosopher of the second part of 20th century. Through minimalism proved existence of God, which is basically a unique God, which the creator of all the heavens and whatever material there is. So these are really proven environments, but reality is that nobody really remembers For example, whether Newton was Christian or Jewish, they used the science that he brought in. Same way Einstein, nobody cares what religion he has. They're using the science that he brought to better humanity in general. Revelation is the same way. Although some of these declaration of human rights were revealed during 1800, it's irrelevant basically what the source of it was. Reality is that that is the Holy Spirit for today. And people do agree with it, but they don't comply with it. And
No,
there's
people recognize it.
yeah,
Jesus said, "My servants will hear my voice." People recognize it. Yeah, but we don't follow it. We
correct.
don't submit to the revelation of God. We want to vain imagination and idle fancy that we can somehow exist outside the framework that God has created.
Well, the biggest one, for example, is the first religion that abolished slavery of any kind, whether it's labor and capital slavery or basically racial prejudice. So these are key elements that was revealed in mid 1800s that slowly seeping into the Western societies. And unless and until we all agree and comply with it, we're going to cause harm to ourselves and our citizens.
Right. One of the criticisms of the Bible is that Jesus merely regulated slavery. He told the masters how to behave, and he told the servants how to behave. He did not abolish slavery. He
Correct.
regulated it. He said, this is how you should conduct yourselves in the institution of slavery. So that's one of the criticisms of the Bible from today's perspective when we look back and sit in judgment of past revelation.
But remember, the socioeconomic system of the time it wouldn't work without it. That's the whole point. It wasn't a byproduct.
It would have potentially caused more harm. There would have been potentially been more misery if you had forced that law prior to humanity being able to manage themselves.
Actually, they've done these statistics that during the time of Jesus, even after that, people would sell themselves into slavery,
Exactly.
not to die from hunger.
Exactly.
Because they couldn't
Indentured
there was no
servitude.
social system
Exactly.
at the time.
That's exactly my point. Thank you.
Right. So it had nothing to do with the Bible. What he was trying to do is remedy the harm that would cause with that interaction, which is obviously became obsolete during the mid 1800s.
Right. Let me give you one example, and this is when you dive into it, into what is actually said in the historical context, it's quite fascinating. There's a famous statement by Jesus called "turn the other cheek." The cause of that is it was legally allowed for a master to backhand his servant. So the statement, if he strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek, was because of the situation that it was illegally allowed to strike a servant. But if you turned the other cheek, the servant would then have to forehand you, which was forbidden. And if the master took advantage of you, so you just turn the other cheek. But if he then took advantage of you, you could then take him to court. And there are two other statements that have the exact same principle. One is if go the extra mile. If they command you to go a mile, go the extra mile. There's a very similar situation. I won't go into it. Right. The other one is if they demand your jacket, give them your shirt also. Another situation. In each of these three cases, Jesus was saying, you must submit to this, and you should do it willingly and with grace. But if they then proceed to take further advantage of you, you have legal recourse. That is built into those statements of Jesus, but nobody realizes it.
But remember, it's very difficult to change a culture of people. And imagine the potency of Jesus's word that said that whoever is free of sin cast the first stone.
Absolutely.
The-
Daniel,
Well
you
said.
joined back in. You probably have something you wanted to add, or maybe you want to use like the hook and pull us off the stage here and land this plane.
Yeah, I think we're going to land the plane. I mean, it's we went a half an hour over, but the reason why I popped in is because, quite honestly, I see that secular responses aren't the best responses for the argument, right? I mean, it may sound like a little bit of a weird, a weird angle to come in on, but I think there's opportunities to make both sides stronger arguments, and I think they're both aligned in a similar place, right? I mean, I heard through Gilbert's conversation today, and I thought the simplicity was very beautiful. That science and religion are of the same bird or the same wing, or science is the wing of God.
Two wings of the same bird.
Two wings of the same bird, right? Exactly. And I thought that was really beautiful because I do see that when the ideas converge, then you do have a beauty there. And I don't think there is a division. I think there's a unity there. And where there isn't, there's a failure with one or the other, and both of them are fallible. And even by the admission of every religion, it's fallible. It knows it's fallible, at least on the ground, right? I mean, so anyways, guys, I want to thank you guys both for spending so much time with us, and we'll be back again next week. And thanks again, Gilbert. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Take care.